Hi, and welcome back to my channel. If you look at the image that I'm going to post, not sure if I'm going to post it on my right or my left, you see that this is another series review. This one here includes reviews for 9 books, hit the tripod, in the Irish Johansen and Roy Johansen Kendra Michaels series. Now, I binge read the first 7 books and any novellas in March of 2020. And then I read the latest book, which is Blink of an Eye, which came out February 2nd. I read that on February 3rd. So this video has me trying to catch up on Goodreads and my blog for this series. I mentioned in another review where I did the Orphan X series review on this channel that I do like to write series reviews, and I guess this would be series review number 37 and 36 or 37, and some reviews may have 2, 3, 5, 7, and in this case it has 9 books. Now let me tell you about Kendra Michaels. Now, and I also want to tell you that if you were to look up any of these reviews on Goodreads, if you look them up individually, you will see that I give a snippet of Kendra Michaels' life before I actually start the review. The reason for that is if somebody was looking up an independent review on my Goodreads account, they would have a little bit of history about Kendra. So I will give you Kendra's history at the beginning of this long review series, but I won't do that for each book. So let's talk about who Kendra Michaels was and how I met her. Now, I met Kendra Michaels in the Eve Duncan series. Now, Eve Duncan is a series that Irish Johansen wrote, and I am curious, let me bring up Goodreads. I think there's 26 books in the Eve Duncan series. I'm going to double check. And I have read that entire series. As a matter of fact, I also read another series by Irish Johansen, and that's the Catherine Ling series. And if I'm not mistaken, there's yet another series. So you got Eve Duncan, Catherine Ling, Kendra Michaels, and possibly another one. So as far as the Eve Duncan series is concerned, I'm just on Goodreads. There are 20. Sorry. Oh, okay. Let me bring it up this way, because when I bring it up the way that I brought it up, it is giving them to me out of order. But I would like to be accurate with this because, like I said, I have read every single one of them. And the accurate count for the Eve Duncan series is indeed 26 books. And I do have the latest 2 of this series as print arcs. I should have bought them in here. And nope, and then there'll be a 27th book. Let's see when that 27th book, because this wasn't on Goodreads the last time I checked. The 27th book in the Eve Duncan series is called The Bullet, and that is coming out in June. So I should be getting that book as a hardcover, just like I have this. Sorry, just like I have this. So I've got to check with Estelle at Grand Central or Forever Publishing. So that's aside. So this is how I met Kendra Michaels, is through the Eve Duncan series. So when I got this book from the publisher, or I got word of this series from the publisher, I was already in the midst of reading the Eve Duncan series. So I binge read that whole series, every single title up until the one that's not out yet, binge read over the course of a couple of months. And then I went and I started the Kendra Michaels series, which is what this review is about. So by me doing that, I already knew who Kendra Michaels was. I was already familiar with her. I had already met her, and as a matter of fact, when we get to a certain point in this review it's going to sound like I am reviewing an Eve Duncan series, and you're going to see why I do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just for the sake of swiftness, if I can use that word, I'm going to bring up my my preview of a pending blog post, because this will go up on my blog, but it won't go up until tomorrow. As a matter of fact, I may not even upload this until tomorrow, so we'll see. So let's get started. Now, the first book in the series, as you can see, and I'm sorry I dilly-dallied for 5 minutes, please forgive me for that, is Close Your Eyes. And I think the first 6 books plus the novella of this series were by St. Martin's Press, and the last 2 books, which were Hindsight and Blink of an Eye, were Grand Central Publishing. So this is a St. Martin's Press book. I got this from my library as an audiobook. As a matter of fact, everything I got until this book I read as audiobooks. And so this again was Close Your Eyes. Like I said, I all but inhaled the Eve Duncan series. So by now I had met Kendra Michaels. And how did we meet Kendra Michaels? Well, we met her as a woman who was a music therapist who had been born blind, was blind for 20 years, and she had a procedure, and it was this procedure that restored her sight, or gave her her sight. Now, the interesting thing is, this brilliant woman, a psychologist, honed her other senses to the point of near perfection. Her sense of sound, smell, and so forth, hearing. She executed her life, or she conducted her life with a very keen sense of everything around her. So by the time she had her sight restored, that only ramped up her level of expertise. Well, she began to be noticed by police agencies, the CIA, and the FBI, and she became a consultant for them. Reluctant most of the time, however, because she wanted to work with the very young, the very old, and of course blind individuals. And using her talents in that is what she would have rather have done. But she again was appealed to for her consultant skills. So it's in this very first book in the Kendra Michaels series that readers meet Adam Lynch. Now, Adam Lynch is a former special agent of the FBI who is pretty much now a government consultant, much like Kendra Michaels is. So now we see the two together in their, I guess, first case, where Kendra comes in and she is called in because her ex-lover is missing, and the fact that he might be dead I want to put it the right way. Okay, Adam and Kendra start to have romantic feelings for one another. There's a connection between them. But because Kendra's ex-lover is missing and might be dead, it puts a damper on anything that could possibly happen for them. And that's pretty much the premise behind this first book in the series. Finding out what happened to him and watching the byplay between Adam and Kendra and getting a feel for what's going to happen in future books in the series. So that, again, was Close Your Eyes. Then this is where I mentioned that I was going to talk more about Eve Duncan, because what we have here is Eve Duncan book number 15, okay? But it's also referred to as Kendra Michaels book number 1.75. Again, by St. Martin's Press. And this book I gave 5 stars. I have loved Eve Duncan. I'll tell you a little bit about her now, because that series is so long I probably will not do a series review on this channel. Eve Duncan is a forensic sculptor who was haunted by the past because her daughter Bonnie had died. Eve always tried to bring closure to families who lost their children by creating sculptures of them so that the family could have closure. And this is what Eve Duncan has done. Now, where does Kendra come into Eve's story or Eve's series? Well, a little bit more about this book is Beth Avery is her mother's friend who is missing, and her mother asks Eve to look for Beth. And this is a little bit of a diversion of what Eve and her husband Joe Quinn do, but Eve agrees to help her mother. So she decides to go to Kendra, Dr. Kendra Michaels, and ask for her help. Eve is aware of Kendra. Eve knows Kendra, and Eve knows that Kendra has an uncanny ability to detect clues and to solve puzzles, to see things that others don't see. And she realizes that the circumstances behind her mother's friend Beth being missing are rather bizarre, and Kendra comes in to help Eve. So that's where I met Kendra. But again, like I said earlier, I read the rest of the Eve Duncan series, and that's where we'll leave off with my review. Yeah, I guess we'll leave off with my review of this book, Sleep No More. And now I'm going to bring up the image for Sight Unseen, which is technically book 2 in the Kendra Michaels series. So I'm going to say this one more time. I read all of the Eve Duncan, then I went and read book 1 of the Kendra Michaels series, and now I read book 2. So if you're looking at this on my blog, you're going to see Sleep No More inserted between book 1 and book 2. So I just wanted to mention that in case you follow me on both platforms. So now again, we're talking about Sleep No More. And we don't have to talk about Kendra's history because it should be quite clear to you about who she is. And what happens in this story is Kendra's mother is determined that her daughter should get married. So she keeps setting Kendra up on blind dates. So Kendra goes on this blind date with this guy named Dean, and the one thing we see about Dean is Dean loves himself. He loves talking about himself, his accomplishments, his achievements, what have you. So Kendra gets kind of bored, so her eyes drift over to a television above the bar, and she sees the scene of an accident being reported on. So she says to Dean, "They're idiots. They're idiots." And he's like, he's still trying to talk about himself, and he's like, what are you talking about? She goes, "The way they're looking into this, I can tell you right now, they're way off base. This is no accident." So she says to Dean, I'm not quite sure how she got to the restaurant, but obviously she didn't have a car because she asked Dean to take her to the scene of the accident. He's very reluctant to do so, but she's very determined, so they go over to the accident. So she approaches the officer that's in charge of things, and she starts sharing her observations. She points out something about the airbag. She points out something about the windshield and the way the victims died and how many victims there were. And she says this was no accident. This is much, much more. So the officer actually gets rather excited because he's like, "I know you're super sharp. You can see things others can't see, blah, blah, blah," and he's getting all excited. But Kendra is all business. Yeah. That's true about me, but let's worry about the victims. So she comes into the investigation. Now, this is where the story really takes flight. Kendra had put away several killers up to this point. The very first killer that Kendra put away was named Eric Colby, a serial killer who has been on death row for 4 years. Well, his DNA was found at the accident scene, but yet he's in prison. So now Kendra, who has been having nightmares about Eric Colby, has to confront him on death row to find out what possible connection he could have with this murder. And that's definitely with these murders, and that's definitely not going to be easy. Now, this is where we get to meet more about Adam Lynch, the FBI special agent that we met in the first book of the series. He's not very prominent in the second book, but he is here, and he does work with Kendra, and the investigation soon puts Kendra in grave danger. And I take that back. Adam is very prominent in the series. It's in the third book, but he's not as prominent. Anyway, she takes refuge in Adam's fortified home. It's like a fortress, and it's very, very safe. And she's doing this because her life becomes at risk. But at the same time, she begins to worry about the safety of her friends. And we're going to talk about her friends in a few minutes. And then she also worries about the safety of her mother. So whether or not these other ones will be targeted is something you'll have to see for yourself when you read this book. And then also, as you read this book, you'll see the more her and Adam work together, the stronger their connection comes. And it does become a case of will they or won't they regarding their relationship. So this was full of action, sexual tension, suspense. Very, very, very exciting read, and I'm really glad that I read this book. Now we're going to move on to the next book in the series, and this was The Naked Eye. And again, if I haven't already said it, it's by Johansen and her son, Roy Johansen. They're co-authors to this series. Now, in this particular book, we have Kendra waking up after a horrible nightmare. Why is she having the nightmare? Well, remember Eric Colby that we talked about, the serial killer? Well, he was to be executed. But Kendra feels like he escaped the needle and that he's at large. As a matter of fact, the police think she's rather crazy. I think it's the San Diego police. They think she's rather crazy. That no, Eric Colby is dead, but she's having nightmares and she feels that he is at large. Well, she wakes up from this nightmare and she gets a text message, and this message is from somebody named Martin Stokes, and he's a homicide detective. And when she gets this message, there's a few details about a murder scene and an address, and it's up to her whether or not she wants to go. So she goes, she showers, she readies herself, and she heads over to the address, and Stokes says, well, I'm actually surprised that you came. Then when she gets there, someone who's familiar with murders and dead bodies, she's really taken aback by the victim, and it turns out to be the body of a reporter, and it's actually a reporter who had previously given Kendra a hard time. Now, Colby comes into this, Eric Colby, the serial killer, and it seems that he's painting Kendra as the killer. So Kendra now has to prove her innocence in the murder of this reporter, and while she does that, she starts to recognize the link that this murder has to Eric Colby and how he has laid things out, and whether or not she'll be able to clear her name, and whether or not Colby isn't alive, and if he is, will she be able to get him back behind bars. So it's most definitely a race against time, because if it is indeed killer, as the killer, that means that Kendra is to be a victim. Her life is in danger yet again. Meanwhile, there's a trail of bodies along the way. So she has a lot to work for. Stop the killer, save her life, and stop the innocents from losing their lives. So just as she was paired up with Adam in a previous book, or the first couple of books, she's paired up with Adam yet again. But not as much as maybe in the first and second books in the series. But in this book, she has her friend Beth and computer consultant Sam helping her, and they're working hard to keep her alive. So will she be able to catch Colby? It's for you to find out if you want to read this book. Now I'm going to move on to Night Watch. Now, Night Watch was a really good story, and the premise behind this story is there's a new killer at large, and the way that this happens is Kendra excelled in anything she touched. If she touched it, it turned into gold. So she's delivering a research paper regarding aging. And as she's wrapping up her speech and getting her papers together, she looks out into the audience. And at the back of the audience, she sees somebody. And it happens to be Dr. Charles Waldridge. And he's the very researcher who is responsible for having her sight restored or giving her sight. Now, it's been 5 years since she's seen Charles Waldridge, and it's not an easy reunion. As a matter of fact, she didn't really ever want to see him again because he was so proud of the success of her sight being given to her that he kind of paraded her across media, and she came to resent that. But she can see that Charles is troubled, and she tries to get behind whatever it is that's bothering him, but he's quite reticent about telling her what's going on. And then to make things worse, that very same night he disappears. So Kendra is definitely on the case. So Adam Lynch comes back in to offer assistance, and we get that dynamic of their relationship coming through the pages of the book. We see a little bit of humor coming through the page of the book. We see that action, that fast-paced nature, and we get a bunch of unsavory characters along the way, and I found it to be a great story. Now, we're going to talk about the next book in the series, which is Look Behind You, and we're still looking at books published by St. Martin's Press. And now, in this case, she's approached by FBI Special Agent Roland Metcalf. And when Metcalf approaches her, he tells her that there have been 3 murders that have taken place in the last week, 8 days to be exact. So he asks her for her assistance. And she's really reluctant to help because she's working with a 9-year-old special needs child and his mother, and she's trying to get this child to communicate by means of music. She's really dedicated to her job as a music therapist, to the child that she's helping right now, but she does agree to work with Metcalf. And as she starts investigating, she soon realizes that these 3 victims are only the tip of the iceberg, because there have been maybe up to 24 other victims. So will she be able to work this case and bring an end to these murders? And as a side, when Metcalf approaches Kendra, he's accompanied by his new partner. What's her name? Her name is Gina Carson, and she's kind of like a annoying fly in your ear when Metcalf approaches Kendra, and she's very skeptical. Do you have any experience? Are you really a cop? And she's really annoying. But Metcalf is singing Kendra's praises, and Carson develops a grudging respect for Kendra. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't know why I'm sweating. So as Kendra starts to investigate this, she starts to recognize certain clues, and they are actually quite chilling clues, and this is why she realized that there were other victims. And then she starts to realize that, again, she could be at risk for her life. Now, as she's working this case, she has other people that are helping her. One is Olivia, her good friend Olivia. And I love Olivia because Olivia works by developing software for the blind. And then she also works with her friend Jesse Metcalf. I think it's Metcalf. Well, we'll just say Jesse, because Metcalf is the agent. She works with Jesse, and Jesse is not only a private investigator but a former war hero, and the 2 of them are very close. So between Olivia, Jesse, and Kendra, they work together, and then Adam Lynch comes in, and they all work together, and they try to stop this serial killer. I think this was a great addition to the series. I love the action, the characters, the scenarios, and the danger, as well as the exciting conclusion. Now we're moving on to the next book in the series, and that is Double Blind. In Double Blind, we see, let's see what, we have a young woman who was killed trying to deliver a package to Kendra. This package included an SD card that had a video. So the woman's body was found near Kendra's building, and it was indeed proven that she was trying to get to Kendra. So of course Kendra takes on this case. Now Kendra starts showing the video, kind of grainy, but it's a wedding reception, and oddly enough, the bride in that video soon disappears. So Kendra really has her hands full as to try to figure out who the killer is, what the motive is, and whether or not Kendra will be able to help. And I stumbled on Jesse's last name before, but it's Mercado, so she works with Jesse. And also Adam Lynch comes in, and they're all working together to bring the killer to justice and to stop any other needless or senseless deaths. And then, just as we had Agent Metcalf in the previous book, in this book we have FBI agent Michael Griffin, and he's also part of the investigation. And I can't leave Olivia out. Kendra's very good friend and the role that she plays in this investigation. So if you've been reading this series like I have, or any other extended series, you may find what I find, at least regarding Kendra. I love how strong she is, how intelligent, how observant she is, and how resilient she is. And I also like how she always has her good friends to depend on and to assist her and to give her resources and share their skills and their expertise in stopping whatever killing is going on. So just as in the other books of the series, this one was a well-done, fast-paced series that I thoroughly enjoyed. Then we move on to the only book in the series that I got a print R2, and that is Hindsight. And I'm not going to hold up the book because it's a heavy hardcover book, but I will pop up the book cover so that you can glance at it while we're talking about it. So in Hindsight, what brings this story to life, as mentioned earlier, Kendra was blind since birth, so she went to a blind school. Well, this blind school that she went to, she finds out that 2 staff members have been murdered. And she also discovers that their cause of murder are 2 different methods of 2 different methods. So the question is, are these murders tied together, or are there 2 killers? So she's definitely going to step into this case because, you know, she went back to the school where she learned a lot of her skills, and now she realizes that she just might be on the trail of a serial killer. And just like before, Adam is there, Olivia is there, and Jesse is there. And then we have Michael Griffin. Remember Michael Griffin from a couple of books before this? He's also there on the case. So I love the continuity. I love the characters. I love the scenarios. I love how everything is tied together in this series or in any long-running series that I've come to love. Whether I binge read it all in a row or I spread it out over time. Like I'm spreading out the Joanna Fluke series. I'm spreading out the Hannah Rayburn series. But then I have another series that I'm binge reading, which is the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Rayburn. That one I'm binge reading. So in some cases I binge read series, in some cases I spread series out. But whether I binge read them or spread them out, I love continuity. And that's exactly what this series does. And what factors into this book that made this book really work for me is the tie-in or the connection to Kendra's past. It's always good when you get to really know a character based on not only who they are now, but what made them who they are, or what made them the person they are. That's I want to say that. So I love this book. It was really good. I'm glad I had a chance to read it. And I'm going to say really quick here that every single book that I'm talking about here, I read in March of 2020. It is now what? March, what's today? March 5th of 2021. So that's my eidetic memory for you. Yeah, I'm glancing down at my notes, especially when it comes to the two different FBI agents. I don't want to mix up their names, or when I needed to see what Jesse's last name was. But everything else, it's locked up here. So anyway, this book cover that I'm popping up here, Book of an Eye, this is the 8th book in the series. And even though you saw 9 book covers on the opening image, those 9 book covers was included the Eve Duncan book. So now we're looking at the 8th book in the series, and this one came out February 2nd, and I read it on February 3rd. So this one is a much more recent read, and what I liked this story because we see a lot of Jesse in this story. Now, we met Jesse already several times over in the series. Jesse, again, is Kendra Michaels' good friend, a private investigator, and a former war hero. Well, Jesse also became a bodyguard to a young superstar pop singer named Delilah Winter. Now, Delilah had just performed on stage, so she should have been going backstage, and she should have had Jesse and others watching her every move, but yet Jesse is kidnapped. She disappears into thin air. So, of course, Jesse goes to Kendra and says, oh my gosh, Delilah is gone. We have to find her. So, Kendra and Jesse work together. But in comes Adam Lynch. So now you have the trio, Adam, Kendra, and Jesse, all looking for Delilah. I loved it. I loved this book. In fact, I gave every single book in the series up to now 4 stars, but this one I gave 5 stars. This one, I felt like I was right in the thick of things with this book. And this book also was great because we had 2 things going on in this book. We had the 3 of them, Jesse and Adam, looking for Delilah, but we also saw Delilah in her captive situation and how strong she was and how she gave as good as she got. So I was reading both stories, and that's what in this one. Now, I love the principal characters in this book, but I also love Delilah, and I loved watching the suspense behind this, and I also loved trying to figure out who the kidnapper was and what the motive was. And I was actually quite surprised as to who the kidnapper was. I was very, very surprised. I also wanted to mention that even though this book was full of suspense and it went at a rapid pace, we have the undercurrent of the romance that's going on between Kendra and Adam. And again, it's that will they, won't they? So with that in mind, and with whatever happened to Delilah, and with the way the conclusion went, it's got me on, exciting. I'm very excited for book 9 in the series. As a matter of fact, I think I just found out that next book in the Eve Duncan series is coming out in June, so therefore I don't have any information as to when book 9 will come out, but I'm sure I will get notified and I will get a print art much like this one and the other ones that I showed here before I started the video. So that's it. I'm going to move this notification with 34 minutes in. So I'm going to end this video. I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, and I will edit this video. I probably will post it Saturday the 6th because it was a video that went up on my channel. So I'll hold this over one day, it'll go up, and we'll see what you think of it. Hopefully you'll grab a hold of these books, and I want to capture your attention for 1 second, because remember I said that there is the Eve Duncan series, the Catherine Ling series, the Kendra Michaels series, and part of me wants to, I'm so determined that there is another series, and I guess there's not. Just like Ling, Michaels, and Duncan. Okay, those 3 series. I have read every book in all 3 series to the tune of perhaps 35 or 40 books in the last year, just by Iris Johansen alone, along with the co-writing of, I'm trying to bring up my Goodreads so I can tell you, but Goodreads is taking too long to load, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you for your time. I will link my blog post in the description below. In the blog post will be the Amazon link for each book. I don't think I will link them in this video, but if you are interested, you can follow over to the blog post and that way you can grab a hold of the books. So thanks a lot. Sorry for the extra, 2 minutes that I talked. All right, bye everybody. Have a good one.